Hey Math 3s, Math 3 honors. We're going to learn something totally new today, so this is a big deal, alright? So I need you to make sure that you're paying attention good here, taking really good notes, because we're going to be doing the rational zeros theorem, okay? It's something completely new, alright? So we're just actually going to have to focus. Like, honestly, you got to focus on this because I'm not in class, you're not in class, and it's just me and you in the videos, right? So I'm going to need you to take really good notes. I'm talking like really good notes, all right? So we're going to bring it. We're doing it. Hey, who's afraid of this? I'm not afraid of it. Are you afraid of it? I'm not afraid, right? Let me show this coronavirus what's up. Got my pens. We're doing a lot of work. I'm doing purple, I'm doing blue. I think I got a little red here too, alright? So, let's do this thing. You guys ready? Got your notes? Me and you. Me and you. There's two parts to this, alright? There's two parts. Alright, let's rock it. Here we go. Alright. So the idea behind the rational zeros theorem kind of goes like this. All right? Kind of goes like this. Let's say I want to factor something that we can factor. F of x equals x squared plus 3x plus 2. Okay? Now you know how to factor that. We know how to factor. We can use our traditional factoring techniques. Now I like to figure out what times what equals 2 and adds to 3, and you say 2 times 1, right? This is something you already know how to do. Okay, so you know how to do this. So factoring now, x plus 2 times x plus 1 equals x squared plus 3x plus 2. You know how to do that. Now, let me ask you this though. Well, let's say this. The idea behind the rational zeros theorem or the rational roots theorem is going to be, we're going to have to learn how to factor something that looks like this. And we're just going to do one set of factoring here. This is number 106 in your book if you want to follow along. It's number 106 in your book of the lesson, what lesson are we on? We're on lesson 8.3.2. So you can follow along with that. That's the one that we're doing right now, okay? So this is number 106 in your book. So here's the idea. P of x equals x to the fourth minus x to the third minus 5x squared plus 3x plus 6. Now, how the heck do you factor this purple right here, right? We know how to factor this by doing the diamond, but we don't know how to factor that. And that's where the rational zeros theorem comes in. We have to find the zeros. So here's what we do. There's a technique, okay? So the first thing that we do is we take this number here, the number 6. Okay, just bear with me here, take notes, follow along. This number 6, that is going to be the P. Okay? We're just calling it P, that's all. Now the number in front of the x to the fourth, we don't have a number there, but we know that there's a 1. Okay? Put a little 1 there so that we know. We'll call that 1 the Q. Okay, that's our Q. Now what we're going to do is let's take our P. Remember, our P is 6. You don't know why it's 6, you just know it's 6. We have to figure out the factors of 6. Okay? So what are my factors of 6? Like, what goes into 6? Well, 1 goes into 6. What else goes into 6? 2, because 2 times 3 is 6. What else goes into 6? 3. And finally 6. Okay, so all we have to do is, all we did so far is that's our P. This is our q. We just called it q. Now, we also have to figure out what are our factors of q. Well, q is just 1. What are our factors of 1? Well, it is just 1, right? Now what we're going to do is let's take the p, all of our p's, and divide them by all of the q's, right? So let's just start. There's only one q, so let's do this p. P divided by q is 1 over 1. Let's do this one. This p divided by this q is 2 over 1. Now this divided by q is 3 over 1. And then this divided by this q is 6 over 1. Okay, so all we did so far was label this as p, label this as q, found the factors of p, which was of 6, 1, 2, 3, and 6, found the factors of q, which is just 1, and then we divided them. Okay, now let's simplify our division. Okay, p over q. Sorry, my paper got wet there. I had to clean things up a little bit. But now, let's see. You can still see what I got here. So now, p over q. I can simplify my p over q. P divided by q is, what's 1 over 1? Well, it's just 1. What's 2 over 1? Well, it's just 2. What's 3 over 1? Well, it's just 3. What's 6 over 1? Well, it's just 6. Now, these are not my only factors. I also have a positive and a negative. Okay, so just put a plus and a minus here. Now, what are these numbers that we just got? Well, remember, let's go back to what we're trying to do here. We're trying to factor this, right? So it looks like that, right? We want to make this look like that. We don't have a traditional way of factoring it. So we're trying to figure out what these numbers are right here. What are our numbers, right? So what we're going to do is, now, these are my possible numbers that go here. That's what I just figured out. I don't know if they are or not, so I have to test them. And you know how I'm going to test them? By using synthetic division, right? We're going to use synthetic. So I got to divide all of these into this big honker right here. All right, so let's go ahead and start. We're going to start with the easiest numbers first. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with positive 1. Because why not? Positive 1 is my easiest number. Okay, so here's how I'm going to do my positive 1. We're going to use synthetic division. Remember synthetic division? You go like this. I'll do it slowly again. I put in a 1, and I'm going to take this number, this polynomial, and I'm going to write all the numbers without the x's. So instead of x to the fourth, 1x, instead of 1x to the fourth, I do 1. Instead of negative 1x to the third, I do negative 1. Instead of negative 5x squared, I do negative 5. Instead of 3x, I do 3, and then I do 6. Let's make sure it's in descending. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And then we go like this. We're going to see if it works. Here we go. I bring the 1 down. Remember, this is synthetic division. We did this a couple of times already. What's 1 times 1? I multiply, and I get 1. What is negative 1 plus 1? Now I add these, right? I get 0. Now I multiply. 1 times 0, 0. Negative 5 plus 0, negative 5. 1 times negative 5, negative 5. 3 plus negative 5, or 3 minus 5. Negative 2. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. 6 minus 2 is 4. Now look, this is not 0. I want it to be 0, so guess what? This is not a factor. So positive 1 does not work because this is not 0. So positive 1 is not a factor. It is not one of these numbers here. So if positive 1 doesn't work, what should we try next? Let's try negative 1. Okay? Now we're going to divide it by this again. So we have 1x to the fourth. I have negative 1x cubed. I have negative 5. I have 3. And then I have 6. We're going to do our little line. Okay, we're going to do the same thing, right? So it's the same thing except for positive 1, now we're going to try negative 1. Positive 1 does not work. Get out of there, okay? So let's try negative 1. Okay, so let's do 1. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Negative 1 plus negative 1, I'm adding these, is negative 2. Negative 1 times 2 is 3. Sorry, not 3. Negative 1 times 2 is 2. Sorry about that. Never do math in pen. Negative 5 plus 2 is negative 3. Negative 1 times negative 3 is 3. 0. Sorry, 3 plus 3 is not 0. What is 3 plus 3? 6. 3 plus 3 is 6. Negative 1 times 6 is negative 6. Now look at that. I got a 0. So that means this minus 1 is one of my factors. Okay? Now let's write down what that would look like so far. So if negative 1 is one of my factors, remember we write the opposite here. So my factor is now x plus 1, right? Because we write the opposite in here. If you remember our notes from before, we write the opposite of what this is. And remember this was x to the 4th, x to the 3rd, x to the 2nd, 3x plus 6. Well, now because we divided, this is now, instead of x to the 4th, I go down 1. This is now x to the 3rd. X to the 3rd minus 2x squared minus 3x plus 6. So now I have one factor here. I got the plus 1. Now, or this minus 1 becomes this plus 1 here. So I got 1. So I factored it so far, but I still can't do my traditional factoring. So what I'm going to do now is, now here's my new set. I'm not going to divide by this anymore. Now I can just divide by this, make it a little bit easier. So let me rewrite it here, because this is, I'm going to divide it by this, right? And I need to factor this, which is here. 1x cubed minus 2x squared minus 3x plus 6, right? Basically, I'm going to do this. Now, negative 1 can work again. So let's go ahead and try negative 1 again. Let's try it again. Negative 1. See if it works. Now I have less to divide, so let's use synthetic division again. So I go 1. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Negative 2 plus negative 1 is negative 3. 1 times negative 3 is 3. 0. Negative 3 plus 3 is 0. And then I got 0 and I have 6. So guess what? Negative 1 is not going to work anymore. Okay? So we'll say we're done with negative 1, which would be x plus 1. So let's stick with these numbers. 1, negative 2, negative 3, 6. Remember, we're still trying to factor this right here. So I got my plus 1 and my negative 1. I'm done with those. What should I try next? Let's try positive 2. Right? So this is the next. We go to our list. We did positive 1, negative 1. What's our next number? Well, let's try 2. After that, we'll try negative 2 if that doesn't work. So let's try 2 here. Okay? So synthetic division. Bring my 1 down. What's 2 times 1? 2. What's negative 2 plus 2? 0. What's 2 times 0? 0. What's negative 3 times 0? Negative 3. What's 2 times negative 3? Negative 6. And 6 minus 6 is 0. And guess what? My 2 is another factor. So let's rewrite it up here. Okay? So I have x plus 1 as a factor. X plus 1 times. How am I going to write this if it's a positive 2 as a factor? X minus 2. Okay? And then how would I write this? Remember, this was x cubed right here. Can you see that? Negative 2x. So if I divided it, now this is an x cubed. What is this now? It goes down. Now that's my now x squared. plus 0x minus 3. Okay? So let's rewrite this. X plus 1 times x minus 2 times, I don't need this 0x here, x squared minus 3. And that'll be my f of x. Now I can't factor this anymore. This is not factorable, so we'll just leave it at like that for now, okay? The x squared minus 3. And I could do it right here, right? I could do it right here. Let's see. See this x squared plus 0x plus 3. Is it factorable? X squared plus 0x minus 3 is, right, this here. Is this factorable? Well, let's try our traditional method, because we know how to factor x squared. Negative 3 here, 0. What times what equals negative 3 and adds to 0? Well, there's nothing. So we'll stop right there, okay? But that's how you do the rational zeros theorem. I'm going to do a couple more with you guys, okay? So here we go. Let's try a couple more. Actually, I think I'm going to take a little bit of a break. Guess what I found? I didn't get this. I got some chicharron here. I don't know. I'm calling it chicharron, but I think it's called chicharrones. Chicharrones? Or is it chicharron? These things are good, man. Look, I bought this yesterday. My family just ate the whole thing. Cool. Ah! Man, it's hot. Don't. This was actually recommended by Jessica. Thank you, Jessica. These are delicious. I need to drink some water. Woo! Actually, they're not that, well, they're not that hot. They're just kind of scratching. Man, these things are so good. These are low in fat. No fat. Oh, I read that wrong. They're pure fat. So, I'm probably gonna eat so many. You know what they say? Once on the lips, twice on the hips. I gotta watch my figure. So, should probably get back to work though. You can always fast forward through this. A little break if you don't want to go through it. Just click till I start doing the problem again. I'm just going to do one more, and then we'll be done. And then you guys are going to be done for the week. At least for this time. I don't know if anyone's going to watch this in the future. Whew! Alright. Let's get to work. Okay. Whoa, let's get this adjusted here. Alright. One last question. Now this is a crazy one, and then we'll be done, but okay. This is actually, I'm going to test you on this. Virtual testing. I don't know if it's called chicharrones. Anyway. So we got a factor and graph. Now we have x to the 4th, so we can't use our traditional factoring method. So let's go through this all over again. Now in order to graph it, of course, we have to factor it to find our zeros. And then that's where the rational zeros theorem comes in very handy. But again, it's a lot of work. So here we go. Let's do this thing. What is my p? My p is my 5, right? What is my q? Well, it's the number in front of x to the 4th, so there's my q, right? So now let's do our traditional p. Let's do our factors of p. Okay, factors of p are going to be p. What goes into 5? Well, it's just 1. What else? And 5. By the way, if you haven't already, go ahead and pause this and try to do it on your own first, and then see if you can solve it with me. Okay, pause. Okay, go. What are factors of q? Well, it's just 1. Now what do I do? look at your notes. We go P over Q. Okay? So P divided by Q, no problemo. 1 divided by 1 is 1 over 1. And then 5 over 1 is 5 over 1. So now simplify our P over Q. So this one's a little bit easier because we don't have so many factors to worry about. 1 over 1 is 1. 5 over 1 is 5. Remember, we have a positive and a negative going on there, right? Okay, so 1 could be a factor, negative 1 could be a factor, 5 can be a factor, and negative 5 can be a factor. We only have 4 to do, because you have 4 to do. You only have 4 raisons, right? So here we go. Let's use our synthetic division. Okay, all this is coming into play here. So synthetic division, we have, well, what number should we divide by first? I always like easy, so I'm going to do positive 1. Positive 1's the easiest. If that one works, then we're good. We got 1. We got negative 8. We got 18. We got negative 16. We got 5, right? We take away our variables. Get rid of our x's. Make synthetic division a little bit easier. Draw our line. Let's make sure this is in descending order. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Yeah. We have all the x's in descending order, consecutively descending. So I go down, I bring my 1 down, no, I multiply. 1 times 1 is 1. Negative 8 plus 1, negative 7. 1 times negative 7, negative 7. 18 plus negative 7, or 18 minus 7, is 11, right? 1 times 11 is 11. Negative 16 plus 11 is negative 5. 1 times negative 5 is negative 5, so I got a 0. Oh, awesome, that worked. That's beautiful. First try, right? Okay, so now let's write our factors over here. I'll do it in blue, so hopefully you'll be able to see it here. So now I have a factor of plus 1, so guess what my factor is going to be? My factor is going to be minus 1. See, try to see, you can see good camera view here. I got here minus 1, so I'm going to say, I'm just not writing my f of x. X minus 1 there. And now this was x to the 4th, so now this brings it down to, because we divided it, now it's x to the 3rd minus 7x squared plus 11x minus 5, right? So I got one factor. Now let's do synthetic division again. Now remember, let's keep doing by 1 in case 1 can be another factor, right? Until it doesn't work, you keep doing it. So now I have all this. It's already here, right? This is the same as this here, so let's go ahead and divide by 1 again. Okay, so now I'm just dividing by this, so I have less numbers to do. So, okay, we're getting a little bit closer. Bring my 1 down. What's 1 times 1? 1. What's negative 7 plus 1? Negative 6. What's 1 times negative 6? Oop, get out of there. 1 times negative 6 is negative 6. 11 minus 6 is 5. And 1 times 5 is 5. And then negative 5 plus 5 is, look at that. We got another 0. So guess what? 1 is factored twice. We can call that a double factor. So how would we write that out? So let's write it here so we can see. So I say that I got this one, x minus 1, and then it happened again. So guess what? I can write it again. X minus 1. Now, what does that equal? Well, this was x to the 4th, divided, x to the 3rd, so what's this? X squared minus 6x plus 5, okay? Now, guess what? This is a traditional, I can factor this traditionally, right? It's a quadratic, so let's, how do we factor quadratic? Put a 5 on the top, a negative 6 on the bottom. What times what equals 5 and adds to negative 6? Pause that, see if you can figure it out before I write it down. Negative 5 and negative 1. Negative 5 times negative 1 is positive 5. Negative 5 plus 1 is negative 6. So my factored is f of x equals x minus 1 times x minus 1. We write those two down there. Times, oh look, there's another x minus 1 times x minus 5. Now, you're told to graph this, so we also have to graph. So now, this, can you see that? This right here is the factored form of this right here. And it makes sense because I'm x to the 4th and I have 1, 2, 3, 4 factors. Now I can also write this as x to the 3rd, but we can also write this as f of x equals x minus 1 times x minus 1 times x minus 1 is x minus 1 cubed times x minus 5, right? That's equal to that. But to graph it completely, let's keep it in factored form. X minus 1 times x minus 1 times x minus 1 times x minus 5. Set equal to 0, x minus 1 times x minus 1 times x minus 1 times x. I just wrote that like 100 times. You don't have to write it that many times. Okay, so now let's go ahead and test our boundaries, right? So now we're going back to the beginning of the chapter where you have to graph a polynomial function, okay? So this is a lot of stuff here. Again, you're going to have to watch this a couple of times. So what are my zeros? My zeros are boop, boop, x equals 1, because 1 minus 1 is 0, 1, 1, and x equals 5, okay? So let's test our limits. We have 1 and 5. Those are our limits. Okay, so in this equation, let's plug in a number less than 1. Let's plug in 0. What's 0 minus 1? Negative. What's 0 minus 1? Negative. 0 minus 1. Negative. 0 minus 5. Negative. I got 1, 2, 3, 4 negatives. That's even. What does that mean? That means it's going to be, over there it'll be positive, right? You can plug in any number, the same thing will happen. Between 1 and 5, what should we plug in? Let's plug in 4. Okay, 4. What's 4 minus 1? Positive, 3. 4 minus 1, positive. 4 minus 1, positive. And then 4 minus 5 is negative. What do we got here? We got 1 negative, which is odd, so that'll be a negative. Now let's plug in 6. 6 minus 1 is positive. 6 minus 1 is positive. 6 minus 1 is positive. 6 minus 5 is actually positive also. It's all positive, so it's positive. Now, let's go ahead and graph it. You can use graph paper, or I'm just going to go ahead and just, remember on this, we're just going to basically see the zeros, so we're not really going to have our x, y, think. So we don't really need to see how high it goes. We just want to figure out where the zeros are. And my zeros are what? Can you see that here? I got a 0 of 1, and I have a 0 of 5, okay? Now, the other thing here is I have a cubic function here, so I got a little cubic function here. And so let's go ahead and graph it. At x plus 1, I got a positive down to negative. Let's do our cubic function little thing right there. Because I go up, I go positive, I go negative, make it a little cubic function. So I go up this way, right between, let's see this again. Before 1, it's going to be positive, so I'm above. After 1, it's going to be negative, so I'm going to be below. Got to get back up to my 5. And then after 5, it will be positive. And that's what it'll look like. Okay, so basically, after all that, right? Go back here. f of x, x to the fourth minus x, 8x cubed plus 18x squared minus 16x plus 5. I need a factor and graph. Factoring it looks like this right here, right? And then the graph is that right there. That's all you got to do. So that's it, man. This is big time. That's hard. But hey, nothing's gonna stop us. We're gonna learn this stuff, okay? And don't be intimidated. See me in my office hours if you don't get it. This is Grady, the cat. Here, I'll hold Grady. Right? Got Grady, he's hanging out here. This is the cat that ran away, but we got him. So we got this little collar. So he can have a little, I don't know, gotta get his address on it. But, oh, there goes Grady. So, rational zeros theorem. Practice it. Watch the video a couple of times. I know it's a half an hour, but guess what? You're not in school, right? You're not in school, but you're in school. This is only a half an hour. You're in my class for 58 minutes. That's Penny. Okay? So, don't be discouraged. I took the time to make this video for you. I want to see a lot of hits on that video. I want to see a lot of comments. I want to see a lot of subscriptions. Virtual teaching. That's where we're at. Okay? Penny. Penny's a fat cat. Alright guys. This is Sensei signing off. Good job. Hey, if you have questions, let me know. Don't be discouraged. We're going to do this thing, alright? You got it. Take care.